I'll tell you this true story. I've shared it so many times, but I'll need to say this. There was this father who had his young son with him. The father was extremely faithful to the Lord Jesus. This is a true story, my beloveds. He used to go to church every single Sunday and take his son with him without fail. One day the father became sick and he departed from this world. This son remained alone, no parents. The mom had already gone before. The father departed, the son is alone. He is now as a teenager, 13, 14 years of age, a teenager with no parents to look after him. He ended up meeting some other boys similar to his age, and he befriended them. And he stopped going to church. 20 years, that priest in that particular church, which he was very close to his dad, he kept asking about the son. For 20 years, he never gave up asking of the whereabouts of this young boy, with no address to this young man. After 20 years, this man walks into the church and he says, "Father, I've heard that you've been asking about so-and-so. Is that true?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Do you want to see him?" He said, "Of course." He said, "Here is the address, Father. He lives at this address." Wow. Monday came. The priest ran to that boy's address. He knocked at the door. That boy opens the door. He is a grown-up man now. 20 years have gone by. He is a mature adult man. When he opened the door, he recognized the priest from that childhood of his. He said, "Oh my goodness, Father, welcome, welcome, please come on in. What a lovely surprise this is." This priest, it's a true story, he was illiterate. He did not know how to read nor how to write. Absolute illiterate. He had memorized all the liturgical books of the church by heart because he didn't know how to read and write. He memorized every book, the liturgies, the baptism, the marriage, he memorized them all. He sat down and he said, "My son, Christ wants you." And this was his statement to every human being he would meet. "Christ wants you." That was a statement. To every person he would meet, he'd say, "Christ wants you." He said, "My son, Christ wants you. You've been missing in action for 20 years. He said, "Father, I promise you, next Sunday you will see me in the first row sitting in the church." He said, "I will be waiting, my son." Sunday came. That man did not show up. The priest goes on the following day, Monday, again to his house, knocks at the door, and he opens. He says, "Oh, Father, come on in. I'm so sorry. You know what, Father? I was gonna come, but something came up in the last minute and stopped me from coming. Please forgive me, Father. Next Sunday, I promise you, I'm coming, and I'm sitting at the front row." He said, "I'll be waiting. Christ wants you." And then Sunday comes. That man does not show up. The following day, Monday, the priest goes again, knocks at the door. That son opens the door and sees the priest. He said, "Father, listen, let us not kid ourselves. You know very well what my job is. That young boy, when he mixed with the wrong people, so-called friends, they led him to the dark path. He ended up being the ringleader of the biggest drug syndicate in that country, the biggest drug dealer in that country. This innocent young boy who was going to church without fail religiously every Sunday ended up being the biggest leader of the drug syndicate in that particular country." You see what happens when you mix with the wrong people? He said, "Father, you know very well what I do for a living. So let's not kid ourselves anymore. Don't waste your time, and definitely don't waste my time. Can your Jesus give me the money that I make every month? Can he?" He said, "My son, Christ's treasure is endless. He is full of riches." He said, "Father, please, go and find another son for your Christ and leave me alone. Don't ever come to this house ever again." He said, "My son, but Christ wants you." He said, "Please go away." The priest goes. He waits for this man to come on Sunday. Obviously, he didn't come. So the priest goes on Monday the following day. He knocks at the door, and apparently this drug dealer was expecting other drug dealers to come to his house, and he gave them this secret knock. That poor priest knocked at the door the exact way of those drug dealers would have done so. This man runs thinking it is the other drug dealers. So he opens the door eagerly, and to his shocking surprise, he sees that poor priest in front of him out of anger and frustration, he punches the priest in the face, knocks him to the ground, and breaks one of his teeth, and blood started coming out of his mouth, from his mouth. The priest was knocked for a few seconds. He got a bit dizzy. Looks like it was big punch. He wakes up, dusts himself off, with blood coming out of his mouth, one tooth missing. He says, "My son, listen, before I go, I'm telling you, this is the last time I will ever come to your house ever again. But the last thing I'm going to say before I leave, Christ wants you." And he walks away. That very night, the police in that country get that guy, the biggest drug dealer in that country. They grab him, and then he was sentenced into imprisonment for nine years. He was thrown in a dungeon, not even 2 meters by 2 meters, underground, absolutely dark, no windows, no light, no nothing. True story. 9 years he was going to spend in that little dungeon underground. When he looked from a citadel, from a mansion into a dungeon, he said, "I can't last 9 seconds. Impossible, I'm going to last 9 years. I'll kill myself." He started bashing on those bars, screaming on top of his voice, "Get me out of here, get me out of here, I can't do it." That prison warden came laughing at him. He said, "Outside you were like a lion. Look at you now, you little mouse. You can scream for as long as you want and as much as you want. You are underground. No one will ever hear you. No one will ever come to your rescue. You will rot like a little mouse in this dungeon." He said, this guy is telling the story himself, true story. He said, "When I sat in that dungeon, absolutely destroyed, he said, I heard a noise in that dark dungeon. I became frightened. I said, oh no, there is another person in the dungeon. Maybe he's a serial killer. He's gonna rip me apart." He said, "And I saw a small bright light coming in that dungeon. I became afraid." He said, "The light started to become bigger and stronger, bigger and stronger." He said, "Until it became so bright, the entire dungeon was lit up with a light that is stronger a million zillion times than the sun we see in heaven. And in the midst of that light, I see Jesus Christ of Nazareth sitting on that ground in that dungeon with both hands and feet chained to the ground." I said, "Lord, what are you doing here? What are these chains in your hand, and why are you in this dungeon?" And then he said, "The Lord spoke to me. And when he spoke, he opened his mouth, and I saw blood coming out of his mouth, and I realized one tooth was missing in his mouth." He said, "Lord, what happened to you? Who did this to you?" And then he said, "My son, you did this to me. You." He said, "I threw myself at his feet, crying like a baby. I said, 'Lord, how could I have done that to you? Impossible. When? How?' He said, 'My son, do you think I am a harsh master? It was me, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, who sent that priest your way. He is my servant. I sent him to you. I was searching for you through this priest, and I begged you to come to my house. You refused my calling. When you punched that priest in the face and you broke his tooth and made blood come out of his mouth, you did not punch the priest, you punched your Jesus. For I am that priest." He said, as I was crying, shedding tears like a baby, I said, "Lord, forgive me. Lord, forgive me. Lord, forgive me. For I have done all this to you, I the blind, the miserable person I am. I beg you to forgive me, Lord." He said, as I was asking for forgiveness, I saw the chains coming out of both hands and feet. And he said, he started rising up and going up and up. And as he was going up, I was saying to him, "Lord, I promise you, when I come out of this dungeon, I am all yours for the rest of my life. Give me that chance, Lord. Give me that opportunity to come back and compensate for every time and moment I have damaged and hurt you, my Lord. Let me heal your wounds." He said, as he was going up, I saw a big smile on his face. He was looking down at me with a huge smile, and he said to me, "I, Christ, want you." The exact words which the priest says to everyone, it was the Lord speaking through him. That man asked for the Holy Bible. He was given a Holy Bible. He lived in a country that was ruled by a different religion. But they brought him the Holy Bible, because when Jesus is with you, no one can stop you. So they brought him the Holy Bible. He spent the 9 years in that dungeon, came out of the dungeon memorizing the Holy Bible from cover to cover by heart. He memorized the entire Bible by heart. And he became one of the most famous preacher ever to exist of his time in that particular country. From the biggest drug dealer to the biggest preacher of the gospel of Christ. How did that happen? Because he went into the prison. He was put to the test. Who threw him in prison? The devil. Who allowed the devil to throw him in prison? The Lord Jesus. When we go through hard times, they can soothe a lot of wounds. They can be a healing to so many issues that we had in our life before. Troubles sometimes are good if we focus on Christ.